I never believed in ghosts. Not really. As a YouTuber chasing the adrenaline rush, I spent years hunting urban legends, unraveling mysteries, and exposing so-called haunted sites. Glenwood Station was supposed to be another notch on my camera strap, a final banger to close out the year. The legend was too good to resist. A ghost train appearing every New Year's Eve, filled with the spirits of passengers killed in a catastrophic derailment decades ago. The station itself, an abandoned relic in the Nevada desert, oozed desolation. Its cracked tiles and rusted rails seemed to invite whispers of the past. Armed with my camera gear and a smug grin, I set up camp in the dim station just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared. I planned a live stream, give the audience a front row seat to my latest ghost-busting stunt. Midnight was when the real action was supposed to begin. The air inside the station grew still, almost heavy, as the hours ticked by. My viewers peppered the chat with questions, taunts, and dares, urging me to venture farther into the shadows. But I kept my focus on the tracks, waiting for the promised ghostly apparition. Then it came, a faint, minty scent that prickled my senses. It was sharp yet crisp, almost pleasant, but out of place in the dusty ruin of Glenwood Station. The wind outside picked up, rattling the station's broken windows, and the air seemed charged electric. A sound began low and distant, like a hum, then grew into the unmistakable rhythm of a train engine. I squinted into the darkness beyond the tracks, doubting my eyes as a silvery glow materialized. Faint at first, then blinding. The ghost train. Its massive silhouette surged toward me, cloaked in shimmering mist. Steam hissed, the whistle pierced the night, and the entire station seemed to quake. My live stream chat erupted with frantic messages, half disbelief, half fear, but I barely noticed. Against all reason, I stepped closer, camera in hand. The train screeched to a halt, and the door slid open with an agonizing groan. Inside, a cold, unearthly light beckoned. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping aboard. The air was icy, my breath visible in the eerie glow. The seats, though polished and pristine, were filled with shadowy figures, passengers whose forms flickered and shimmered like candle flames. They were trapped in an endless cycle, replaying their final moments. A woman clutched a child, her face frozen in anguish. A man flipped through a newspaper, oblivious to the terror around him. Screams echoed through the carriage, the sounds of chaos and pain. I turned to leave, but the door behind me slammed shut, locking me in. Panic gripped my chest as a figure emerged from the shadows at the front of the carriage. The conductor, he was tall and gaunt, his hollow eyes boring into mine. His uniform was scorched, his hands bony and pale. He carried an air of authority tainted by despair. "Kyle," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "You think this is a game?" I froze. How do you know my name? This train is no playground for thrill seekers. Do you know why we're here? I stammered, trying to respond, but my throat felt tight, my words useless. "These passengers," he continued, gesturing to the tortured souls around us, "are victims of my greed and negligence. I doomed them for profit, cutting corners, ignoring warnings. I bear their pain." He stepped closer, his skeletal hand reaching for me. "But you are no different, Kyle." "What?" "No, I didn't kill anyone." I protested, backing away. He snarled, his voice rising. "Haven't you? How many risks have you encouraged others to take with your reckless stunts? How many lives have you endangered for your entertainment?" My mind raced. Memories of dangerous challenges flashed before me, egging others on, laughing off near misses. I had always shrugged off the consequences, dismissing them as part of the thrill. The conductor raised his arm, and I felt a sharp, searing pain tear through my body. I collapsed to the floor as visions overwhelmed me. I was no longer Kyle, the cocky YouTuber. I was a woman clutching her child, her body racked with terror as the train derailed. I was the man with the newspaper, hurled through shattered glass. I lived every horrifying moment of their deaths. The panic, the helplessness, the agony. Each vision tore into me like claws. Each scream reverberated in my ears, leaving me gasping for air. "Stop. Please stop." I cried, writhing on the floor of the carriage. The conductor's hollow gaze bore into me. "Only when you understand. Only when you accept your part in the suffering of others. I get it. I'll change, I swear. I sobbed. The visions faded, the icy grip loosening. The conductor loomed over me, his expression unreadable. Redemption is earned through suffering, he said. Remember that. The door behind me creaked open, and I scrambled to my feet, staggering out of the carriage. The moment my feet touched the platform, the ghost train dissolved into mist, leaving the station eerily silent once more. I stood there, trembling, my camera equipment forgotten. My live stream had long since cut out, but the experience was burned into my soul. I left Glenwood Station that night, not as a thrill seeker, but as a changed man. My videos now focus on educating, warning others about the consequences of recklessness. I use my platform to encourage responsibility instead of blind adrenaline chasing. But every New Year's Eve, I relive that night. I smell mint in the air, hear the faint hum of a train engine, and feel the cold hand of the conductor on my shoulder. Some scars never fade. The lighthouse loomed against the pale sky, its weathered stone structure standing defiant against the ceaseless crash of waves. Belcliff Lighthouse, a beacon of salvation for sailors in the past, now felt like a forgotten relic of despair. I, Arthur Blackwood, had been hired to prepare it for reopening. The idea of living in isolation off the coast of Maine might have seemed daunting to others, but for me, it was an opportunity for solace. On my first day, I arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and a toolkit. As the ferry departed, leaving me alone on the small, rocky island, I felt an inexplicable weight settle over me. The air smelled of salt and seaweed, but beneath it lingered a faint, sour tang of decay. The lighthouse itself was in poor shape, the paint peeled off in long strips, and the once proud lens atop the tower was a shattered ghost of its former glory. The first thing I noticed were the footprints. They appeared on the sand near the cliffside, weathered but unmistakably human. I followed them out of curiosity, their path meandering dangerously close to the edge before stopping abruptly. There was no sign of anyone around, no boat, no figure in the distance, just the footprints and the endless expanse of ocean beyond. I shrugged it off. Perhaps they were old, left by some curious visitor before the island was officially off limits. That night, as I unpacked my belongings and lit the small fireplace in the keeper's quarters, the lighthouse seemed to come alive. The wind howled through cracks in the stone, carrying with it the mournful groans of an ancient structure long neglected. I reminded myself that this was part of the job. Fixing, restoring, preserving. Then the light went out. I froze. I hadn't touched the lamp yet. It wasn't even operational, but the faint, rhythmic beam that had been cycling since sunset abruptly ceased. The room was plunged into darkness. A shiver ran through me. Not from fear, I told myself, but from a sudden cold that seemed to seep into my bones. And then I heard it, a muffled sob, faint and haunting, carried on the wind. It came from the tower. Heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way up the spiral staircase. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound amplified in the eerie silence. When I reached the lantern room, I found the shattered lens reflecting the beam of my flashlight in fractured patterns. But there was no one there. I checked the light mechanism. It was untouched, exactly as I'd left it. Yet the sobbing persisted, growing fainter as if retreating from me. I didn't sleep that night. The following morning, I began my work in earnest, hoping to distract myself from the events of the night. The first task was to replace the old lens. As I cleared away the shards of broken glass, I discovered a leather-bound logbook tucked behind the machinery. It was brittle with age, the ink faded but legible. The entries began routinely enough, weather reports, ship sightings, maintenance logs. But as I read further, they became increasingly erratic. July 3rd, the storm rages on. Supplies dwindling. Ship overdue. July 10th, no sign of rescue. The beacon fades. I fear for the sailors. July 15th, promises broken. Betrayed. They left us to die. The final entry was scrawled in a trembling hand. July 20th, I hear them calling. The waves will take me. The light will guide them home. My stomach churned as I pieced together the story. The previous keeper had been stranded during a violent storm, abandoned by the rescue ship that was supposed to bring relief. He'd perished waiting for help that never came. Over the next few days, I focused on restoring the lighthouse's forgotten history. I contacted the mainland and arranged for a new lens to be delivered. I cleaned the tower, polished the rusted mechanisms, and repaired the beacon, yet the sobbing persisted, faint but constant, as if the lighthouse itself mourned its tragic past. One night, as I sat by the fire, I felt compelled to return to the logbook. I read through the entries again, searching for some clue, some resolution. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. A name scrawled on the inside cover, Elias Greaves. Determined to learn more, I ventured into the local archives during my next supply run. There, I uncovered a newspaper article from the late 1800s detailing the tragedy at Belcliffe Lighthouse. Elias Greaves had indeed been the keeper, abandoned by a rescue ship due to treacherous conditions. His body was never recovered, but rumors suggested he'd thrown himself into the sea, unable to endure the isolation and despair. I felt a pang of guilt, as if I'd intruded on his sorrow. Back at the lighthouse, the sobbing grew louder. I knew what I had to do. I climbed the tower with the logbook in hand and placed it on the pedestal beneath the new lens. Elias, I whispered, my voice trembling. I've restored the light. Your story won't be forgotten. The sobbing stopped. For the first time in days, the air felt still, peaceful. The beacon illuminated the dark sea, its light cutting through the fog like a blade. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. On stormy nights, the sobbing returns. It's faint, almost imperceptible, but it's there, carried on the wind, mingling with the crash of waves. Some say it's just the wind playing tricks, but I know better. Elias Greaves lingers here, bound to this place by promises unkept and betrayal unresolved. And so I remain, a solitary keeper of the light, haunted by the echoes of the past. I keep the beacon shining, not just for the sailors at sea, but for Elias, for his peace, for his revenge, and for the unbroken promise that no one will ever be left behind again.